Well, boys, looks like you started the fun without me.
You're all sick. Every last one of you.
We're going to need a bigger gun.
What's the matter? You scared of things that go boom?
Give me one goddamn reason why I shouldn't blow your goddamn brains all over that goddamn wall.
Right out of the gate, my name is Eric, and Michael Kester, I'd like to ask you a question.
All right, hit me.
First question is, what are we doing on the show?
Today we're going to do My Bloody Valentine and Poltergeist. That's easy.
All right, so I
had that one. I had that one in the bag.
Very easy. So for new listeners of our show, I'd like you to give me really just your honest opinion here.
Okay.
Do you think that our own studio that we record double feature in, this very studio we're in now, do you think it is haunted?
Well, our equipment breaks inexplicably. We seem to be bleeding funds at a rate that I honestly cannot account for.
Sure.
And food keeps just disappearing.
No one knows where the producer has been for
Mysterious noises
months.
coming from nowhere.
Yes.
And we get sick every time we're in the studio.
Yeah, that's also true.
So absolutely fucking not.
No chance then that
No,
the studio
0% chance.
Studio is haunted.
Yeah.
I'm going to second that opinion. We have two films, and, you know, I think we might have vaguely alluded to this show as our slasher show.
Whoops.
I would still stand by that, and here's why.
Okay.
My Bloody Valentine is enough fucking slasher movie for two films.
I will hit, yeah, okay. Now
Poltergeist is not a slasher film by any stretch of the imagination. But we do have two horror movies, right?
Two 80s horror movies.
You got it. And we are going to spoil both of them. Now, they've been around since the 80s, so I don't know, maybe you know what happens in them. If you don't, you can use the chapters. You can skip over the part where we spoil the movies.
It happened once. It happened twice. If you don't cancel the dance, it'll happen thrice.
That is a note from My Bloody Valentine.
It's the worst. It's, I believe, I stated the worst poem in the film.
Yeah. The fact that you have to qualify that is there are many poems in the film. This is the worst of the poems in the film.
Although I think runner-up for worst poem in the film is "You Didn't Stop the Dance."
Yeah, well, you know, sometimes you play a little more free verse there. You and I can pick on My Bloody Valentine because we adore it.
Oh my god, it is.
It is often considered one of the best slasher films of all time. Yeah, I mean, make no mistake about that.
And we do a lot of slasher shit on double feature.
We certainly do. But we haven't visited that good true 80s stuff in a while. And I think of the 80s era slashers, this one is, I mean, what's most mind-blowing about this movie, and we'll talk about a lot of different stuff, but there aren't any sequels to this film.
Yeah, there's
Can we just talk about that right away?
There's no sequel. They did that remake, the 3D one.
Sure, the 2009 one.
But yeah, no sequels.
But what about My Bloody Valentine 2 or 3?
Or for the final chapter.
Yeah, why is this not in a Killapalooza?
5, A Bone to Pick.
I'm perplexed by this. It has the notoriety. It's probably a Black Christmas kind of thing. Never saw a sequel to that either. Man. There were a bunch of the 80s slasher films that they never had franchises.
Sure, but the thing is the weird thing about My Bloody Valentine is it's so iconic. And it's so well put together, and the packaging is so good. It's a holiday slasher.
Yeah.
I mean, holiday slashers are the easiest ones to do sequels to.
Sure.
You take something like House on Sorority Row or Terror Train.
Right.
You can't really solidify how a sequel would come about.
But you think April Fool's Day, there was a potential loss there?
We're not here to talk about that. Although they were packaged together for like 10 years. My Bloody Valentine and April Fool's Day. The only way you could get My Bloody Valentine was by buying April Fool's as well.
Well, yeah, that's back when the DVD was still the cut version, right? For a long time.
Well, they just a couple of years ago, right around the same time the remake came out, they released the My Bloody Valentine super special bloody unrated edition.
Right. So you and I, for a drastic change of pace, we're always watching the unrated stuff on here. You and I decided, let's watch the original cut.
Sure.
Now, I know you've been watching slasher stuff a lot longer than I have. I'd actually never seen the original cut. That's how widespread the uncut version is. For as many fucking times as I've seen this, I've always seen the unrated version with the extra footage.
Right.
And I mean, the footage that's lost from this movie is fucking legendary.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about this stuff. We've mentioned on the show a couple times, how different the footage looks.
Yeah, it looks a lot shittier because they didn't, edit it.
They pulled it out of a vault and slapped it in the film. At least they took the time to insert it into the correct parts of the film.
Yeah, that's true.
good.
I guess the cop out there would have just been to include it as deleted scenes or some shit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this was sought after for a long time. We always think about that uncut version because that's just kind of the version that, everybody talks about. But they had to cut the movie before it even hit the theater, obviously for the MPAA. And for the longest time, the studio, I mean, this is a film from the 80s, and it's just a couple of years ago we finally saw the original film before all the cuts happen. So years are going by, and the studio just refuses to put this out. They don't want to invest any time in it. And I think it's partially how much people clamored for that. Yeah. That might have led to the remake anyways. They said, well, we'll just do one giant My Bloody Valentine push all at once. So we start to get, all these fancy packages with the re-release and then the remake stuff and then 3D, all kind of just hits in this onslaught, this 1 year of My Bloody Valentine stuff.
Well, all the deleted scenes too. I mean, it's a real shame that it got cut from the film because in context, had they color corrected it and fixed everything and made it look like real scenes in the film.
Sure.
The special effects, the practical effects stuff that they did, it's all really brutal.
Yeah, it's amazing seeing this original version and how much less violent it is. Because it's only a couple minutes that are lost.
Right.
The lost footage of this, it's talked about almost like when we talked about London After Midnight. That was just on Freaks and The Straight Story the other day. But we were talking about London After Midnight being that movie. It's a lost film and no one's ever actually seen it. And the only copy was destroyed. And that's kind of how the footage was here, just because Paramount was keeping it under lock and key.
Yeah.
It's weird to see how the movie feels a little bit different. I mean, it effectively means you spend less time with the slasher.
Right.
Which is good in one way. It makes him much more enigmatic and really iconic because of that. Because every brief glimpse you get of him is, oh, here's the My Bloody Valentine
dark
slasher.
And heavy and quick.
Yeah, right. And it's all him coming up on what will be an absence of violence in this version. But it also means that it is, as you said, less violent, which is a shame. But if you're a fan of the movie and you've only seen one version, I would actually recommend just seeing the other version too. Just to kind of get a feel of that. A lot of My Bloody Valentine for me has always been about the feel. It's been about that 80s slasher mood, that thing that the sleepaway camp stuff, and you mentioned fucking Terror Train.
Right.
But this is in a really great period of that. This is my favorite period of slashers, is kind of very, very late 70s, very early 80s, 79 to 81. That is my favorite period of slashers.
Where they still employ the use of first-person slasher cam.
Yeah, where you get the point of view shots. They're unaware of what's to come heavily in the 80s.
Right.
The late 70s, that was Black Christmas and Halloween. But then into the 80s, that's where you start getting into the franchise stuff.
Sure, you start getting Jason Takes Manhattan.
Absolutely.
Freddy Plays Nintendo.
Sure. Well, that's the late stuff. But even the early stuff is Friday the 13th. That's right about the same time as this, and then they turn that into a franchise. Well, what's great about this is it's the same thing as with Black Christmas. These are they're very serious films at the time. The tone is a lot darker because of how serious they're trying to be horrifying.
Right. Well, it's not. They're not quite like you said. It's not established as a fun thing for teenagers to go and make out to. Although My Bloody Valentine in slasherdom does have such a perfect setup for a slasher film. It certainly does.
Yeah.
Because it's Valentine's Day. That's when kids actually party and have sex, which are key components to killing off a bunch of teenagers.
Well, all holidays are like that.
Well,
though.
you think
Isn't
that
every holiday an excuse for kids to party and have sex?
Do you really think of Halloween as the night you get laid?
I don't really have a specific night of the year.
I'm just saying. You don't
actually. I think of April Fool's Day as the night I get laid.
That's for different reasons.
My birthday is on April Fool's Day. No one's going to know what we're talking about.
But Valentine's Day, I mean, that is the night you get laid. You expect kids to be horny, and you expect kids to be wanting to have a good time. You know what I expect
is everybody to have those terrible fucking chocolate boxes around.
Yeah, full of
no, those things are terrible. Yeah. Why do people like boxes of chocolates?
I don't know.
Would you not rather have a mountain of candy, of literally any candy, than a box of chocolate?
Pretty much, yeah.
They're filled with all this oh, God, I fucking hate boxed chocolates. So, you're missing that comedy component a lot from the early. I wouldn't even say that. I think they're still funny. They're just more sincere. They're not maybe as intentional.
You have
funny.
Howard. Howard is the comic relief in My Bloody
Valentine. He's more the, hey, everybody, come on, chill out. This is a party. Let's have a good time.
So much. I'm always ecstatic when his head falls off.
You want a point of view shot of him dying is what you're craving. Yeah, the first person stuff, the point of view stuff. My favorite one from this one is... Obviously, you have the laundry room one. The laundry room, whatever. Let's decorate the laundry room with Valentine's Day. It's ridiculous. But the longer point of view shot when they're going into the mine, it's not even really so much a point of view shot. It's just there's no characters in it. It's I've developed in the last year or two this love of really slow tracking shots that back out of scenes. I can't quite put my finger on why yet. But when you're slowly leaving a room and exiting and the camera's a little low and you're especially going down into a mine, you're leaving safety. You're going into the treacherous area, but it's not slowly pushing you in. Instead, you're seeing yourself pulled out of, there's above ground and there's safety and there's where everything was okay. Now you're going to be fucked.
Well, and the mine shaft and the whole miner dynamic. I mean, Harry Warden.
Sure.
And the whole mythology is just, it's another, we already talked about how they didn't make sequels.
Sure.
And I feel like having such a evil, menacing fucking slasher like Harry Warden and his domain is dark caves.
Right, yeah.
And he has a flashlight on his head. He is a scary motherfucker.
Right.
I would watch Harry Warden smashing light bulbs in a mine for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
You could make a sequel of just Harry Warden smashing light bulbs.
Oh, well, the killer is so boss that you're right. The scene where he's going through and just knocking out the lights, it's perfect. The whole mining aspect of this is part of that really distinctive character. It's, we've talked a lot of times about Bright Falls and Alan Wake, that it was kind of in promotion to. Alan Wake is thought of in the same way as Bright Falls as being very Twin Peaksy, but a lot of that, in honesty, was mining towns and, people who kind of worked in the blue collar industry and that sort of stuff. That kind of aesthetic isn't used very often. It's, I did just to look at Alan Wake and Bright Falls barely picked up any of that. I think it was called Poets of the Fall, the music video thing they did for Alan Wake used it even more. But, the movie, My Bloody Valentine, actually films in a mine, which must have been a complete pain in the ass, but it does so much for that atmosphere. I feel like it's almost unfair. We come on here and we kind of go, 80s slasherdom, isn't that great? And it's like Black Christmas, and we even get a detective, and there's a holiday theme. Holiday theme, of course, being, after Friday the 13th, there's a very deliberate emphasis on that stuff. Or the riddles, that was another part of... the 80s slasher thing. Here we have a little bit less, it's an element of mystery. Is this killer coming back? And, it's funny, we call him Harry Warden, but there's that whole obvious turn at the end that happens. You just think about him as that character.
Well, and the whole film goes out of its way to still pretend that it matters who the killer is.
Right.
That's another thing that...
Well, don't all of the slasher movies do that?
Well, eventually,
Does
like
it ever
you said,
really matter?
when you get to the mid and late 80s, it's Jason, it's Freddy, it's Chucky, it's Michael Myers. Yeah, that's true.
Unless it's Halloween 3 or that fucking ambulance driver.
But in the initial, the advent of slasher films, there's still this intrinsic need for the whodunit, this desire to... Slasher is not a genre at this point in time. It's a horror film.
Yeah.
It's a murder mystery almost.
Sure.
So they red herring every single fucking character. Could it be the cop on his patrol?
Yeah.
Or is it TJ who's back in town for the first time in 20 years and now there's murder? What's going on over here?
Horror is still kind of finding itself for that era.
Sure, and without fail, you always watch these films. Now, we do. I don't know if people did in the 80s, doublefeatureshow@gmail.com, but you watch it nowadays and try to find the least conspicuous character because that's who it's going to end up being.
Yeah, but the point I was driving at is that for everything that, we think about this as both a perfect example of, a typical 80s slasher film, but also one of the most distinctive ones.
Sure.
It has some of the most character. the kind of opening and the stillness in there, it's weird. There's these icons, the breathing sound, the absence of score during some of the most climactic parts, just so you can get that kind of respirator, mine shaft, oxygen sound. And that continues through the movie. I mean, the score itself is, for a large part, reserved for the more tender moments and less the kills. Right. It's there sometimes.
There's your banjo bluegrass score when Quitting Time.
Yeah, right. Time. But that's what I mean. It's more for the funny, the light scenes, the bar scenes. It's always bar death or curse. Mine in this.
It's for the death curse scenes.
Yeah, in this movie. But when you think about it in contrast to something like Halloween, which a lot of people cite as, especially for the franchises being, one of the big origins, that's all music kills. That's all, creepy it's John music. Carpenter. Yeah, right.
He doesn't let up on the keys for a second.
And then, of course, there's the Canadian accents, which also add character. You want to talk about a fucking character, though? You're right, Death Curse guy. In the scenes when we're not in the mine, which means we're always in the fucking bar, the Death Curse guy... So there's a couple things that are unique about this character for being, again, a spin. It's weird to call it a spin on a cliche that didn't exist yet. Right. It's as if everybody took...
The cliche has started spinning at this point.
They didn't take any of the distinctive parts. They just took... Maybe it's the opposite, though. Maybe Death Curse was formed out of characters like this, and the parts that weren't picked up as part of the cliche look distinct to us now. But at the time, you probably didn't go, oh, he stares into the camera all the time. That's a weird thing. I guess the Death Curse guy still kind of does that sometimes. So we talked a little bit about eyeline matching, I think, on the Cronenberg show, on the History of Violence, when we did that movie on the show. I was talking about kind of, how your character will stare into the empty 2/3 of the frame at, let's say, a 45-degree angle. And then you'll cut to over the shoulder the other character staring back into the opposite side of the screen, his 2/3 of the empty frame at that same 45-degree angle. And that's how you get this implied... It's called eyeline matching. It's just a way to imply that your characters are speaking to one another.
Sure.
But in this movie, everybody's staring off into a 45-degree angle, looking over at the bartender, and then the bartender is basically staring directly into the camera. And he narrates the flashback, which is... strange. You get a flashback of, what's going on? So it's exposition via flashback via Death Curse.
But he also has the little twist where he's going to show them. He'll play a mean joke. He gets involved, and that's kind of it's a red herring. Is the Death Curse guy actually Harry Warden? It's just, all these characters have so many levels, which is just something that eventually got lost in slasherdom. Even the cop, the Ahab, he's actually a human.
Sure.
He's not gun-toting, coming out, knows everything about the situation, and he'll show up when it's necessary.
Right.
He's confused. He's scared. He doesn't have any idea what's going on. He's not bumbling, but he's misinformed. He doesn't know about the party. He's doing his job. He's actually a fucking cop.
Yeah, you're right. I never think about the other characters from this movie, ever.
Yeah.
Because... The Harry Warden or not Harry Warden is...
that's really...
I mean, it's such a great... Just the look and the feel, and, you go to a movie like this and you get really excited for those parts, but those other characters are a lot different too, and I guess that was kind of similar in Black Christmas.
Yeah.
Whether it's an accident or not, at this point, we will look back and we will say, bravo movies, way to have very distinctive characters as well. You had to remember too, I mean... We talk about the violence being cut out, and they kept putting this back through for the MPAA. Back in those times, that wasn't, I don't think, as offensive to the... No, fuck that. It was offensive to the filmmakers.
Sure.
I'm sure they were upset about it. But these movies, to remember back to them, the slasher movies, they weren't often made for the purposes of art.
Right.
They were made they have less of a cash-in appearance now. They don't look like exploitation. But these films were kind of looked down upon.
Yeah.
These were the cheap way to make a buck. I mean, Friday the 13th is infamously known as the movie that was made to keep the lights on. Right. They had no idea that was a franchise.
Sure.
Which is funny because that really helps make it a cash cow.
Sure.
But it was almost a kind of quiet shame to be working in a genre like this that we can now look back and pay so much tribute to.
Well, it's because it was so formulaic and so easy and so...
cheap thrills, right?
Yeah,
that was why it was looked down on.
You go in and it's dime thrills. You're right. It's teens, tits, and blood.
Mm-hmm.
And that's especially in the late 70s, early 80s, before exploitation became okay to love for teens and tits and blood and fast cars and high octane. That was still, that was when Scorsese was hitting it big. That was when, just post Godfather.
Yeah.
That was the heyday of classic cinema.
Sure.
Taxi Driver, Scarface, the films that people regard as great movies coming out mixed with My Bloody Valentine. Having your name on something like My Bloody Valentine around then, that's definitely not.
Sure.
It's not going up over your mantle.
Poltergeist, on the other hand, would then be that kind of hybrid of blockbuster and horror film.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also starts with the national fucking anthem.
Yeah.
Really? I like the second time they come back to the national anthem, that TV white noise is like a fucking bomb going off at the end. It's something that just very post-apocalyptic about it. The national anthem plays and then the bomb goes off. I feel like I'm going to steal that for something somewhere in the future. I'll have to tag it in this episode so I can remember when I came up with that idea.
Good plan.
And by came up with, I mean steal from Poltergeist.
So kind of just like how Tobe Hooper stole the film from Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there.
I don't either.
Yeah, it's funny, right? It's definitely funny.
Really, that I think at the basic level, that is what it is. Because I've seen Poltergeist. I didn't pay attention to the opening credits because I knew the one name, which was Tobe Hooper. And it's no secret on Double Feature that as a horror guy, I don't have very high regard.
Well, here's
Tobe
why.
Hooper.
I'll tell everybody why. This is very, very clear, and you can tell me how close I get to this. Of all the directors we cover, and we like talking about directors and understand them and getting them, Tobe Hooper, I don't think, especially for as well regarded and as much as he's thrown in with these other big horror Takashi Miike, John Carpenter kind of names. That's my like 40-year span.
Yeah, that's a good. I'm impressed.
He doesn't have a distinct style.
No.
Of his own. He makes a lot of pretty well-known movies.
Yeah.
But I mean, look at fucking Texas Chainsaw Massacre and then Poltergeist. Those two movies are made allegedly by the same person. Can you believe that?
Yeah, well, the thing that it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We talked about it on the show. We love that film.
Yeah.
That's a great film.
But it's an art house film.
Yeah.
When you look at Poltergeist, it's as much adventure, fantasy, or certainly science fiction as any of these. And it's hard to make that claim because it's monsters and ghosts and dead people and whatever attacking these people. There's really nothing sci-fi about it.
No,
but we're opening gates to other dimensions.
Yeah, it's true.
You know what I mean? It doesn't, the way it goes about it, it is a pretty strict ghost story, but you can't shake the feeling of fantasy or adventure from it. So the thing that happened with Spielberg is weird because when you watch this movie, you just see Steven Spielberg. I mean, I think that's where this claim probably comes from mostly. But so the backstory here is essentially that Tobe Hooper got the directing credit on this.
And Steven Spielberg got every other credit.
Right. Well, producer, screenwriter, right? He's the, the kind of behind the scenes man. A lot of people will allege that Steven Spielberg actually directed this movie. That this is as much his movie as, fucking E.T.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is a conspiracy or if this is something we can actually kind of look at. Because there's just not enough evidence for it.
Right.
And there's so much of people want this to be a Spielberg movie, and it does feel like a Spielberg movie, that, it's really easy to just go, oh, I could kind of see how the moon landing was fake, and wouldn't it be convenient?
Yeah.
And then I would know a cool little secret nobody else knows.
Sure.
And, that's our tendency as human beings to believe in conspiracy. But when you look back to a couple of the interviews with people at the time, they all said Tobe Hooper was a little bit loopy on the set, maybe had some drug influence, might not have worked day in and day out at the critical decision-making stuff the way Spielberg did. But that doesn't make him any less of a director than, when a producer has a strong role, has a strong say in what a movie's doing.
Well, I think for me, the biggest discrepancy from Tobe Hooper films is that Poltergeist seems so safe. And I know I kind of went off at the end of the film, I went off on a little bit of a rant while we were watching. I'm sorry I made you sit through that whole thing because I got a little frustrated. But Tobe Hooper made a film after Texas Chainsaw called Eaten Alive, which was about a guy who fed people to alligators.
Sure.
You know, in Kill Bill, my name's Buck and I'm here to fuck.
Sure.
That line is taken from Eaten Alive.
Yeah.
Robert Englund is Buck in Eaten Alive.
Oh, beautiful.
Anyway, Tobe Hooper is violent. He's dark, he's violent, he's gory, he's very much a horror director.
Well, we want to think Tobe Hooper is that,
Sure.
but who knows what Tobe Hooper is?
That's very true. But Spielberg is not. That's not his go-to. That's not where he lives, and that's not the realm that his films live in, which is probably why he's a lot more of a popular director and why the wider audience will go to a Spielberg film.
Sure.
And Poltergeist is so safe. No one is ever really in danger. A family is separated.
Sure.
That becomes the stake of the film, is that a little girl is away from her mommy. And then toward the end, when things seem really intense and there's explosions and more lights flashing,
Sure.
bodies coming out of the ground, not attacking anybody.
Right.
You loved it, but really the most dangerous thing to happen is a giant pillar of fire spouts out of somebody's front yard, but no one gets hurt.
Fire safety is very important, man.
I know, I understand that, but the film is really safe and the stakes are really low. They just do a good job.
So you don't mean it doesn't have horror moments,
No,
or
not at all.
that the film is safe, but the content of the things happening in the film. This is a fairly safe journey.
The stakes are so low. They
Right.
just do a really good job of translating the intensity.
Being caught forever in another dimension, that doesn't bother you.
Not really.
You would be totally fine with that.
She seemed okay.
As long as you can podcast from that dimension, I don't think it would change our lives much.
You might have to go back to a tube television.
Kill me. The strobe light TV, there are a lot of moments that, that do have some really genuine scares to them, or really, I mean, it's creepy as fuck. The eye shine, and when she's first sitting in front of the TV and it's showing her and it's just flickering. I don't often think, oh, there's a creepy child. This is really working.
Sure.
Very frequently, I see that in a movie and say, fuck you, movie. You think you can just put a kid in here and turn the lights off and it's scary.
Right.
But this is one of the few times it's truly unique. I really do feel that way.
Well, it's hypnotic. And plus there's the iconic "We're Here" line. For me, that's just the opening line to Primus's Frizzle Fry record.
Okay.
But to most people, that's...
I thought My Bloody Valentine would be your first music reference on this show.
Oh, well, I blew that one, didn't I?
Well, it's that scene. I mean, the parents torture these children with scary devices. Yeah. The fucking tree out the window.
Oh, I love the tree.
Chop that thing down. What are you doing?
I love that tree.
Or the scary clown. I mean, why is that even there? They're just fucking asking for it. I love this. He covers the scary clown with what is somehow the scariest Chewbacca I've ever seen. Why is that Chewbacca so terrifying? They just can't win, these poor people. I love their parents, though. I mean, that's one of my favorite things about this movie. Diane and Steve, they're essentially teenagers.
Sure.
They're pot smoking and carrying on. They diving off the fucking bed, Diane's always wearing short shorts and laughing at, her daughter, cursing out the construction workers outside. I mean, they're in their hearts, they're very, very youthful people. Nothing about them is proper. I'm so used to seeing that in films with children. I think that's what makes me not like the children, is that, I see children in a film and I know, wow, now there's no one I can relate to.
Right.
Because they're going to have parents, and I'm not going to like those people either because they were proper enough to have kids. Occasionally, though, you will meet people in your life who are cool parents.
Yeah.
And these people, for as little as I have in common with them, are cool parents. Diane's punk haircut would have, kept her a little bit over the edge. But she had a thing going on there, right? It was Rogue from X-Men.
Yeah, for sure.
Why would you want to get rid of that?
I don't know.
I love that she also describes her experience as being akin to a hangover at the end.
Yeah.
That's how you know we've gone through a journey. We've learned nothing. No character growth. I don't always want character growth. That's fine.
No, yeah, I totally agree. I feel like sometimes people are strong enough to be themselves through a situation.
Yeah, you don't want to change if you like who you are. These people don't. You could say their poor parenting is a flaw, but I don't know that they're poor parents. They rescue their kids from hell or otherworld or limbo or...
I think the real flaw is going to people who use ectometers and...
Oh my God, you're reading my mind.
The whole fucking...
Well, I think it's because we were talking about responsibility.
Of Ghostbusters.
Jesus, fuck. The kind of effects and spookery of this movie. I mean, it's divided in... Do you like that? It's divided in two kind of areas. There are the the painted on effects.
Sure.
And then there are the very practical effects.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the theater of the I love just seeing you walk into a room and it's not even really an effect. It's some stacked chairs.
Yeah.
You had a prop guy glue chairs together and put them on a table. And for me, that's one of the best effects in the movie.
Yeah, for sure.
It's that practical stuff. I like the sliding chair that comes across, all the stuff playing around in the kitchen, right?
I like the crawling steak. I'm a big fan of the crawling steak.
Good.
I know it's a really obvious moment, but when the skull comes out of the closet and almost eats Steve, that to me is just this horrifying don't fuck with the closet moment.
Yeah, right.
That it just sticks with me.
Well, there's a lot of that stuff. I mean, I think about the chairs because of that one scene, but there's also the scene where, you know, the kid gets up from bed or whatever, and the chair it's the real world stand-in for the ghost.
Right.
It's there's a chair staring at him. I mean, that's where I do start to see the more Texas Chainsaw, Tobe Hooper stuff. If we could have gone through the entire movie doing that, then I would really say, you know, those signatures seem a lot more similar to me. The fancier stuff is good too, though. One of my favorite Vertigo shots is in this movie.
Well, they do the Vertigo shot, and then she runs down the hallway, and they do the Vertigo shot.
They Vertigo and then try and follow her a little bit. Yeah, just the effect of using that in a hallway. Anytime you're doing a Vertigo shot in a corridor, that's...
Well, and they have the lighting. It's sectional lighting down the walls with the door frame at the end. It's really... It looks awesome. It looks fucking cool.
The other thing they make use of is really one of the oldest examples I can think of the rolling reverse delay. This gets a little more technical, but we do the engineering for our show as well as all the other stuff our producer's not doing. So a lot of people don't know this. We wrote the theme, you and I.
Yeah.
We recorded that. I think we talk about it on something like the 3rd episode or something pretty far back. But one of the effects to make all those little clips, you wrote, and I recorded those clips, just people we know.
Right.
And so they don't actually come from movies.
Yeah, they're not from
actually
movies.
sampled.
We made them up.
But to make them sound more like samples, we applied a lot of engineering stuff to it. So one of the things that's on there, I think it's on the Are You Afraid of Things That Go Boom kind of line in the middle there that drops out. There's that rolling reverse delay. And you can hear it in here when Caroline's talking from the TV. It's an echo, but it's also kind of backwards.
Right.
That's the reverse aspect of it, I suppose.
Sure.
Done in a way
like
where it's timed it's just a very unique effect.
Right. It sounds like the vocals on the Blood Flowers record.
Now The Cure. Still
I'm
don't
sorry.
want to mention My Bloody Valentine. You're going for an ambient record,
stick it
and
at
you're
the
still
end.
not going to talk about My Bloody Valentine. So while we're over here in our low-budget studio using computers and other forms
Also
of...
not haunted, should mention.
Right, in another area of the world, conveniently not haunted, there's a bunch of ghost hunters pretending that is the case. Still using the fucking sliding chair trick from Poltergeist.
Right.
They just steal their nonsense out of movies.
It's so dumb. Well, it's just, I mean, I feel like they go and they watch something like Paranormal Activity 3 and figure out how they can do that now.
You know, part of that I blame on film. You can't actually blame art for things like this, but I'm going to do it anyways. The treatment
like
movie,
Columbine?
Yeah, see, now you're making me feel really bad about
sorry.
this. The movie has no ethical responsibility to mock ghost hunters. That's just what I would do.
Right.
I'm not going to blame anybody for that. But they treat these ghost hunters, I mean, that's what we do in cinema. We make larger-than-life characters. We treat these ghost hunters.
Faces off.
Yeah. You might be thinking, oh, larger-than-life characters, these ghost hunters aren't really larger than life. But if you've ever met one of the scumbags that actually cons people out of money or goes on TV pretending the world is in a reality in which it is not, fuck those people. Self-delusional or otherwise, fuck those people. This movie treats ghost hunters as if they're far more legitimate than they are. And that's part of the fiction. But, you know, the ghost hunters in here, they look specifically more responsible than actual ghost hunters are. Actual, that's air quotes, actual ghost hunters. Actual fake ghost hunters.
There you go.
You know, like the scene where it shows them all, they're talking amongst themselves. When they're talking amongst themselves and no one else is around, they're either A, playing pretend and talking in character. I'm, again, speaking about real world ghost hunters here. Or B, talking about how to divide up the money that they're stealing from these. I'm not a very cynical person. I think they're often self-deluded or they like playing pretend. I think that's why ghost hunters do that. But they're having this very private conversation about, oh, you know, we have to make sure we isolate this so it's not structural leakage that's causing the equipment to malfunction. I mean, ghost hunters don't have that conversation.
Right.
They scan your wall until they find some poor copper wiring and some old electricity, and then they claim it's ghosts. Or they say, this can't be seen by the naked eye, so let's use time-lapse photography.
Yeah.
Did no one on the set know what time-lapse photography is?
I guess not. It was a time-lapse camera. It wasn't time-lapse photography.
Oh, well, that's fine. Maybe it's just the time-lapse cam they use that happens to have infrared or spectral analysis.
I believe what a time-lapse camera films is stuff happening over time.
That's precisely what it does. So the only way they would catch ghosts using a time-lapse camera is if the ghost showed up once every 4 or 5 days and you didn't want to sit around bored, as you usually do if you go on a real-life Joe Nickel-esque ghost expedition. You often spend your time sitting around bored in a haunted house. What you really see in the real world is a mixed bag of practical tricks that these people use to give the illusion that there's, it's a fake seance, right? They're doing this. It's The Last Exorcism. When we watched The Last Exorcism.
Perfect.
That was exposing what ghost hunters / witch doctors / whatever pseudoscience nonsense is actually using. So the first place they go for help is their neighbors, which is funny to me looking at this. We were just talking about the welcome to the dollhouse kind of suburbs thing, and how there's things in the suburbs that just aren't like things in the city. One of them is going to your neighbors.
That's true.
If something weird was happening in my building, unless it's a leak, I can't go upstairs and talk to the guy up there. You're bothering them. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, I live in a 3 flat. It's not, you live in a building and I live in a 3 flat.
I'm always in buildings with thousands of occupants.
And I prefer, smaller buildings, smaller management. It's a preference thing.
Yeah.
But what that leads to is knowing your building mates, because there's 6 people, right?
Sure.
I still wouldn't go to them for anything.
No, you can't.
I wouldn't go to them for the proverbial cup of sugar. I would walk to CVS down the street and buy an entire bag.
Well, that's because you're a capitalist and not a fucking hippie. I'm sorry, let's keep the anger directed towards the ghost hunters and not towards hippies. We can do that on another show. As everyone breathes a collective sigh of relief that I didn't manage to get Atlas Shrugged on year 4. Sorry, everyone. Fingers crossed for next year. So when the neighbors fail, and perhaps more important than really any other actor in this film, even the charming dog that adds a strange amount of character to the dog gets its own scene. I mean, it is just as much as sliding in the kitchen is one of the iconic family moments, having the dog around. Zelda Rubinstein is in Poltergeist.
No, we've seen her on the show before.
We have in her last film role, I believe her last film role in Behind the Mask.
Right.
Maybe one of my favorite of her roles.
Sure.
Poltergeist, I don't feel like is, for as much as that is her iconic role, I don't think it's a very good representation of the way I imagine Zelda in a lot of these movies.
Well, because she's not in her own. She's still kind of acting as opposed to being creepy.
Sure.
She has this natural, it's a charisma, but it's a very dark charisma.
It is.
And Poltergeist, maybe because of the Spielbergism, the Spielberg-esqueness of it.
Right.
She needs to be family friendly.
Yeah.
She needs to have her I am clairvoyant moment. The cute quips and the personability that comes with being in a family situation. I really always imagine her alone in a rocking chair in a creepy room.
Well, see, you imagine Tales from the Crypt, Zelda Rubinstein.
Right.
I imagine Taste the Rainbow, Zelda Rubinstein. She did a lot of voiceover work too, a little bit of Nickelodeon stuff. I mean, I don't think of Zelda the same way I think of someone like Richard Riley, who is, Richard Riley you depend on to be Richard Riley because you love Richard Riley. That's who you want out of him. I think Zelda has a little bit of muscle.
Sure.
She can, in a role like this, I mean, she's smaller than all her other...
Right.
Physically, the movie makes her shorter than all her other parts. And she's got those weird aviator glasses, that you remember back from this. But that's not how I remember her. I remember her from her creepy kind of behind the mask roles, or the other side of her work, which is the Skittles Taste the Rainbow voice, that kind of voiceover work stuff. Same creepy voice, does 2 totally different things. Zelda was one of the people who is part of, the curse of Poltergeist.
Sure.
I mean, I don't want to, at the risk of setting up a straw man, I'm not going to include her in this because I don't often hear her name thrown around. But a bunch of people from the Poltergeist movies have died.
Yeah, well, a bunch of people from a lot of movies have died, Eric.
I feel like we've covered this before.
I believe if you go back to a film like, say, Citizen Kane,
sure,
almost everyone from Citizen Kane has died.
Well, that's because of the curse of Orson Welles.
Right.
You know, Orson Welles himself once died.
What? So I know a lot about the Poltergeist curse. I know that
Sure.
The little Carol Ann,
Sure.
I know that she was one of the victims. And the other one, and this is an actual brutal, horrible thing, and it really affected me when I read about it. The older sister, did you read about how she died?
Yeah, right. Strangled.
By her boyfriend in her driveway.
Yeah.
And people are writing this off as a curse.
I know.
How fucking belittling is that?
I know, it really is.
It's awful. I feel so bad. Can you imagine her family? If
I
somebody,
can't, no. I mean, it's terrible.
She gets murdered by by a jealous boyfriend, and the majority of people are going, "Oh, that's what you get for being in a scary movie."
Yeah, right.
Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you.
Yeah, man, I feel like it was the Rosemary's Baby show that maybe we talked about this, where, people died in the production or whatever. Those are the two people who died in a little bit more horrific ways.
Yeah.
I mean, it's only 4 people. It's 4 people in 3 films, first of all.
Yeah.
If you don't count Zelda, which I don't, because she died 2 goddamn years ago or whatever.
And she was old.
Well, the other 2 people were in their 50s or 60s.
Sure, but the only 2 that really even struck me as anything to note was the 2 little girls.
Yeah, that's true, because it's untimely.
Yeah.
So 2 untimely deaths in 3 movies, or in 1 movie if you want to give them the credit. It's, they used human skeletons in the pool scene, and everybody threw a big fit. You know, the lead actress, I mean, you can go on, if you go on like the Hollywood tours, haunted graveyard, whatever thing, they visit her tomb, and there's this long-standing thing about how she haunts one of the Paramount lots. I mean, one of the guys who died of the 4 was diagnosed with cancer before this fucking movie even came into fruition.
Yeah.
Before he was even cast for the part. So the whole thing is, much like conspiracy theories, it's one of those, fun to talk about if you don't know anything else about Poltergeist.
Except it's a lot more fucking insensitive.
It really is. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm really worked up over it, but that's just because domestic violence drives me insane.
Yeah, pretty fucked up. And I think we should end there. We have a website. It's doublefeatureshow.com. And then you mentioned the email address being doublefeatureshow@gmail.com.
That is the email address at least the one that I'm informed of.
If you'd rather not end on a downer note, actually, you know what, a really good show to refer people to for all the stuff we were talking about today would probably be the Amityville Killapalooza. Yeah. I know I mentioned that Rosemary's Baby show, but if you haven't gotten into a Killapalooza yet and you are just going to cheat, not watch the films, and just listen to one, head over from this show to the Amityville one, where we'll be doing some more serious haunted house work in the name of skepticism.
All right, so next time we're going to cover some fantasy. We're going to cover some weirdness and some funness.
George Lucas and Neil Gaiman, huh?
Yeah, well, and we're going to get a little Jim Henson, and to be completely fair and honest and to warn everybody, we're going to get a little Gervais, but it's going to be in a different way this time.
When you say a little Gervais, is that a pun?
No. So
the movies are going to be Willow and Mirror Mask.
And I'm really excited, so watch more fucking film.
Bye. Variety, it's probably a Black Christmas kind of thing. Never saw a sequel to that either. Man. There were a bunch of the 80s slasher films that they never had franchises.
Sure, but the thing is the weird thing about My Bloody Valentine is it's so iconic. And it's so well put together, and the packaging is so good. It's a holiday slasher.
Yeah.
I mean, holiday slashers are the easiest ones to do sequels to.
Sure.
You take something like House on Sorority Row or Terror Train.
Right.
You can't really solidify how a sequel would come about.
But you think April Fool's Day, there was a potential loss there?
We're not here to talk about that. Although they were packaged together for like 10 years. My Bloody Valentine and April Fool's Day. The only way you could get My Bloody Valentine was by buying April Fool's as well.
Well, yeah, that's back when the DVD was still the cut version,
right?
For a long time.
Well, they just a couple of years ago, right around the same time the remake came out, they released the My Bloody Valentine super special bloody unrated edition.
Right. So you and I, for a drastic change of pace, we're always watching the unrated stuff on here. You and I decided, let's watch the original cut.
Sure.
Now, I know you've been watching slasher stuff a lot longer than I have. I'd actually never seen the original cut. That's how widespread the uncut version is. For as many fucking times as I've seen this, I've always seen the unrated version with the extra footage.
Right.
And I mean, the footage that's lost from this movie is fucking legendary.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about this stuff. We've mentioned on the show a couple times, how different the footage looks.
Yeah, it looks a lot shittier because they didn't, edit it.
They pulled it out of a vault and slapped it in the film. At least they took the time to insert it into the correct parts of the film.
Yeah, that's true.
Good.
I guess the cop out there would have just been to include it as deleted scenes or some shit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this was sought after for a long time. We always think about that uncut version because that's just kind of the version that, everybody talks about. But they had to cut the movie before it even hit the theater, obviously for the MPAA. And for the longest time, the studio, I mean, this is a film from the 80s, and it's just a couple of years ago we finally saw the original film before all the cuts happen. So years are going by, and the studio just refuses to put this out. They don't want to invest any time in it. And I think it's partially how much people clamored for that. Yeah. That might have led to the remake anyways. They said, well, we'll just do one giant My Bloody Valentine push all at once. So we start to get, all these fancy packages with the re-release and then the remake stuff and then 3D, all kind of just hits in this onslaught, this 1 year of My Bloody Valentine stuff.
Well, all the deleted scenes too. I mean, it's a real shame that it got cut from the film because in context, had they color corrected it and fixed everything and made it look like real scenes in the film.
Sure.
The special effects, the practical effects stuff that they did, it's all really brutal.
Yeah, it's amazing seeing this original version and how much less violent. Guys, is not a slasher film by any stretch of the imagination. But we do have two horror movies, right?
Two 80s horror movies.
You got it. And we are going to spoil both of them. Now, they've been around since the 80s, so I don't know, maybe you know what happens in them. If you don't, you can use the chapters, you can skip over the part where we spoil the movies.
It happened once. It happened twice. If you don't cancel the dance, it'll happen thrice.
That is a note from My Bloody Valentine.
It's the worst. It's I believe I stated the worst poem in the film.
Yeah. The fact that you have to qualify that is there are many poems in the film. This is the worst of the poems in the film.
Although I think runner up for worst poem in the film is "You Didn't Stop the Dance."
Yeah. Well, sometimes you play a little more free verse there. You and I can pick on My Bloody Valentine because we adore it.
Oh my God. It is
often considered one of the best slasher films of all time. Yeah. I mean, make no mistake about that. And we
do a lot of slasher shit on Double Feature.
We certainly do. But we haven't visited that good, true 80s stuff in a while. And I think of the 80s era slashers, this one is, I mean, what's most mind-blowing about this movie, and we'll talk about a lot of different stuff, but there aren't any sequels to this film.
Yeah, there's
Can we just talk about that right away?
There's no sequel. They did that remake, the 3D one.
Sure, the 2009 one.
But yeah, no sequels.
But what about My Bloody Valentine 2 or 3?
Or for the final chapter.
Yeah, why is this not in a Killapalooza?
5, A Bone to Pick.
I'm perplexed by this. It has the note.
Well, boys, looks like you started the fun without me.
You're all sick. Every last one of you.
We're going to need a bigger gun.
What's the matter? You scared of things that go boom, boom?
Give me one goddamn reason why I shouldn't blow your goddamn brains all over that goddamn wall.
Right out of the gate, my name is Eric, and Michael Kester, I'd like to ask you a question.
All right, hit me.
First question is, what are we doing on the show?
Today, we're going to do My Bloody Valentine and Poltergeist. That's easy.
All right, so I
had that one. I had that one in the bag.
Very easy. So for new listeners of our show, I'd like you to give me really just your honest opinion here.
Okay.
Do you think that our own studio that we record Double Feature in, this very studio we're in now, do you think it is haunted?
Well, our equipment breaks inexplicably. We seem to be bleeding funds at a rate that I honestly cannot account for.
Sure.
And food keeps just disappearing.
No one knows where the producer is.
Mysterious noises coming from nowhere.
Yes.
And we get sick every time we're in the studio.
Yeah, that's also true.
So absolutely fucking not.
No chance then. That
no, 0% chance.
Studio is haunted.
Yep.
I'm going to second that opinion. we have two films, and I think we might have vaguely alluded to this show as our slasher show.
Whoops.
I would still stand by that, and here's why.
Okay.
My Bloody Valentine is enough fucking slasher movie for two films.
I will. Yeah. Okay. Now
Poltergeist, it is, because it's only a couple minutes that are lost.
Right.
The lost footage of this, it's talked about almost like when we talked about London After Midnight. That was just on Freaks and The Straight Story the other day. But we were talking about London After Midnight being that movie. It's a lost film and no one's ever actually seen it. And the only copy was destroyed. And that's kind of how the footage was here, just because Paramount was keeping it under lock and key.
Yeah.
It's weird to see how the movie feels a little bit different. I mean, it effectively means you spend less time with the slasher.
Right.
Which is good in one way. It makes him much more enigmatic and really iconic because of that. Because every brief glimpse you get of him is, oh, here's the My Bloody Valentine
dark
slasher.
And heavy and quick.
Yeah, right. And it's all him coming up on what will be an absence of violence in this version. But it also means that it is, as you said, less violent, which is a shame. But if you're a fan of the movie and you've only seen one version, I would actually recommend just seeing the other version too. Just to kind of get a feel of that. A lot of My Bloody Valentine for me has always been about the feel. It's been about that 80s slasher mood, that thing that the sleepaway camp stuff, and you mentioned fucking Terror Train,
right?
But this is in a really great period of that. This is my favorite period of slashers, is kind of very, very late 70s, very early 80s, 79 to 81. That is my favorite period of slashers.
Where they still employ the use of first person slasher cam.
Yeah, where you